Founders Academy is a 3-part learning journey designed around the real stages of company building. Lesson 5, designing your MVP. Build the smallest thing that proves the biggest assumption. Learning objectives. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand what an MVP actually is and what it is not, identify the riskiest assumptions in your startup, choose the right MVP type for what you need to test, and design a focused 2 to 4 week MVP sprint. Most founders don't fail because they can't build. They fail because they build the wrong thing for too long. I have seen founders spend 6 months making progress, only to realize that they never actually tested the assumption that mattered. The product got better, the confidence grew, but the truth or users never showed up. This is the execution inflection point. This is where founders stop playing startup and start behaving like builders of real companies. The goal here is not momentum for momentum's sake. It's evidence. The founder mindset shift here is going from impressing to learning. One of the hardest shifts founders need to make here is letting go of the desire to look legitimate. Early stage founders often want their MVP, their minimum viable product, to feel real, complete, and credible. But legitimacy doesn't come from polish. It comes from learning faster than everyone else. I have watched founders avoid launching because they were worried about how something would look instead of focusing on what it would teach them. The strongest founders I know treat early builds as disposable. They expect to be wrong. They expect to throw things away. And because of that, they learn faster and move with more confidence. The goal of an MVP is not to impress, it's to learn. Framework 1, the riskiest assumption map. Every startup, no matter the industry or stage, rests on a small set of assumptions. I usually break them into 4, in this particular order, and moving through one at a time. First, the problem. Is this actually a real pain? Second, the solution. Does what you're proposing meaningfully solve it? Third, demand. Do people want this now, not eventually? And fourth, economics. Can this become a real business? Founders often want to test everything at once. That's a mistake. Your MVP should test only one thing, the first unproven assumption on that list. If you're still unsure the problem is real, don't build a solution. If you know the problem exists but are not sure your approach works, test that. Sequencing matters. I have seen founders waste enormous effort validating assumptions that didn't matter yet, while ignoring the one that could kill the company early. Framework 2, the 5 MVP types. Once you know which assumption you're testing, the next decision is how to test it. This is where founders often default to what feels familiar. Build something that looks like a product. But the best founders don't choose an MVP format based on what feels legitimate. They choose it based on what produces the clearest learning with the least effort. Think of MVP types as 5 different testing instruments. Each one is useful for a different kind of risk. The first is a concierge MVP. This is when you deliver the outcome manually. There is no automation, no platform, no scalability, just you doing the work. It sounds unglamorous, but it is one of the fastest ways to learn what customers actually want, what they will tolerate, and where the value really sits. Most founders uncover their true product direction just by being the product for a small group of users. Early Stripe did parts of this by handling pieces manually behind the scenes, not because that was the business, but because it helped them understand what developers needed before they formalized it. The second type of MVP is the Wizard of Oz MVP. This one looks automated from the user's perspective, but behind the scenes, humans are making it work. The goal here is to test behavior without committing to building full infrastructure. It's specifically useful when the experience needs to feel seamless for the user, but you're still unsure whether the demand is real. Early Zappos did this. They validated that people would buy shoes online before building the logistics, inventory systems, or operations. The third MVP is a landing page MVP. This is the cleanest test of demand when you don't need product interaction yet. You pitch the value proposition, collect emails, measure intent, and see whether people lean in or scroll past. It's not proof of product market fit, but it's a fast signal about whether the message is resonating and whether the pain is urgent enough to create action. The fourth MVP is a lightweight prototype, like a clickable Figma or a simple no-code flow. This is best when you are testing usability, clarity, and workflow, not technology. It helps you learn where users get confused, what they assume will happen next, and whether your solution feels intuitive. I have seen teams redesign an entire product direction after 10 prototype sessions because what made sense in the founder's head didn't make sense in the user's hands. And the fifth MVP is a scripted demo. This is one of the most underrated MVP types. You show the outcome without building the backend, almost a controlled narrative of the experience. This is powerful when you want to validate whether the outcome is compelling before you invest in building the machines behind it. The test isn't whether the system works yet. The test is whether people want it badly enough that the work becomes worth doing. The point is simple. Each MVP type is a different shortcut to learning. The right choice depends on the assumption you are trying to test, not on what you want to show or what feels like a real product. The mistake founders make is choosing the MVP that feels most legitimate or most impressive. Strong founders choose the MVP that matches the risk they're trying to remove and that will give them the ability to learn the most. We have talked about MVPs as experiments, but it is worth slowing down and being very precise here because confusion at this stage is expensive. An MVP is not a stripped-down product. It is not a half-built app, a work-in-progress version, or your version 1. And it is definitely not a 6-month engineering sprint disguised as learning. Those things feel productive, but they delay the truth. A real MVP is much narrower. It is the smallest thing you can build to test your riskiest assumption. Smallest means no extra features. Thing means whatever form proves a point. And that's not always software. Riskiest means the assumption that would kill the company if it is wrong. And assumption means something that must be validated with real human behavior, not opinions. Framework 3, the 4-week MVP sprint. Strong founders don't let MVPs drag on. They time box learning. A simple structure I've seen work repeatedly is a 4-week sprint. In the first week, you define the assumption clearly and design the MVP around it. In the second week, you build only what's necessary, nothing more. In the third week, you test with 10 to 20 real users. And in the fourth week, you decide. You either proceed, pivot, redesign, or kill the idea. What matters here is discipline. Speed beats polish. Learning beats perfection, and scope creep is the enemy of insight and learning. Here it is in more detail. Week 1, the MVP pyramid. Which assumption should you test? One of the most damaging execution mistakes founders make is testing the wrong level of risk first. Every startup carries 3 layers of risk, and they must be tested in order. At the base is problem risk. Does anyone actually care enough about this problem? If the answer is no, the startup should stop, not pivot endlessly. Next is solution risk. Assuming the problem is real, does your solution meaningfully fix it? If not, you iterate. Only at the top is the execution risk. Can this be built well and repeatedly? This is where hiring, architecture, and scale start to matter. Most founders start at execution because building feels tangible. Strong founders start at the problem because truth lives there. In week 2, build only what is necessary to test the assumption. When founders struggle with MVPs, it is rarely a capability issue. It is almost always a clarity issue. The build gets messy because the thinking wasn't sharp enough upfront. A simple structure helps prevent that. Everything starts with defining the riskiest assumption. Ask yourself, what must be true for this to work? And if it turns out to be false, does the startup die? This shouldn't be comfortable to write down. If it feels easy, you're probably circling around the real risk instead of naming it. Once that assumption is clear, the next step is deciding the smallest possible test that would force the truth to show up. Not confidence, not encouragement, the truth. Ask yourself what you could build in 7 to 14 days that would make reality unavoidable. If the answer still feels abstract, the test is too big. From there, choose the MVP type that best fits that test. Not the one you're excited about, and not the one that looks impressive. The one that answers the question fastest and with the least effort. Before building anything, define one clear success metric. This matters more than most founders realize. Your metric should be observable and quantifiable, and as binary as possible. It could be something like 40% of users return the second week, 10 companies sign letters of intent, 50 users complete onboarding, a 15% click through to buy, or a quarter of visitors responding to a landing page call to action. The exact number matters less than the discipline of choosing it in advance. Then build, but build fast. A real MVP takes days or a couple of weeks, not months. If it takes longer than 3 weeks, you're no longer testing an assumption. You're investing in a product. In the third week, you start to test. Testing also needs to be real. That means 10 to 30 actual users, real data, real behavior, real willingness to pay, not people who think it's cool, not people being supportive, people who actually feel the problem. More on this in the next lesson. In the fourth week, you have to decide. This is the hardest part. There are only 3 outcomes. If no one cares, you stop. If they care but not enough, you iterate. And if they use it repeatedly without being pushed, you move forward. Anything else is avoidance. Clarity at this stage creates speed later.